Opp Talks. This week, this day, maybe this life has led me to turn on this camera today to tell you specifically that your constant want to be somebody else is leading you to not become the person you were meant to be. And quite frankly, it's stealing your joy. Constantly comparing yourself to this other person. It's also taking away the current moment. Let me repeat that though. Your constant want to become somebody else or be somebody else is keeping you from becoming the person that God made you to be. You have a purpose. And, I needed to turn on this camera and say this today. So many impactful things are happening in my life, and I'm filled with so much passion. And quite frankly, like lately, I've been kind of struggling with, am I able to get all of this done in time, And am I able to, do all of this right now the way that God wants it to be done? And if you're working and if you're doing something, you should be confident that things are going to be okay. God says, I think in Matthew and in Luke, there's no reason to worry about the next day. There's no reason to have anxiety or all of this stuff, because if you look at the lilies of the field or the birds of the air, they don't care, and God clothes them every single day. And not Solomon in all of his splendor or glory, is what the translation says, was arrayed like one of these. The wisest man in the whole entire world wasn't arrayed like that. And I see men today, let's take, for example, this guy that I'm working with. He might be getting fired, might not be getting fired. He wasn't able to show up because of some, medical problems. And I'm talking to him about what's going on, and he's like, yeah, the boss looks at me and probably sees this type of person and that, and I'm just this and I'm that. And I said to him, whoa, bro. Like, you cannot be sitting there comparing yourself to this, all of these superficial things, or what, maybe if I did this or that, all this regret and all this anxiety and all this stuff compounding on top of you is what will eventually lead to your demise. Kids every single day, young men are blowing their brains out, committing suicide at record numbers because of this world that we've put them in. A lot of people sit there and they say, Gen Z doesn't have it hard. Gen Z isn't wise. Gen Z sits on their phone. Like, if you look at the suicide rates, if you look at what these kids are impacted with, if you look at the nihilism that leads these kids to go shoot up schools, if you look at the way that these kids are eating and sleeping and living their life, they have it the hardest out of any generation. And, if you took a second to talk to any of them, I talk to old men all of the time. And once they have an actual conversation with me, the thing that I hear most often is, wow, I never thought somebody of your generation could have a conversation like this. So I'm taking a look at, listen, stop comparing yourself, because comparison is the thief of joy. Stop sitting there beating up on yourself constantly. Give yourself a shot. Everybody else is already beating up on you. Everybody else is already competing with you. They don't want you to do good. Like, why are you sitting there and getting down on yourself constantly? Why are you sitting there and living your life like this? And whether you believe in Jesus or not, Jesus isn't saying this to shame you, like, oh, you shouldn't be worried about your life. But he's saying, like, hey, man, you don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. That was old you. You could beat up on yourself, but this is new you. And, like, I want to say to whoever's listening to this, I know I'm on, like, a sick one right now, but look around. Look at, like, if you're in the car, if you're in your bedroom, if you're in, at your desk, look around and realize that in this moment, I am so alive and I'm in control of my life and I'm able to do something. I'm able to change something. I don't think right now, I don't think there's a single person that couldn't change their life around with one thought. And that could be for the worse or for the better. The business guy who's sitting, screwing over all of his employees. He doesn't pay any of them what they deserve. He doesn't give them health benefits. If he has one thought, maybe I should just be a little bit better, he can change so much. And that guy, that is so kind to somebody and is always doing the right thing and always taking the beating from the whole entire world, He listens to everybody's problems, maybe even a therapist, something like that. He could have one thought, maybe I'm worthless, and he could kill himself and ruin his life. See, that's the balance that we're on right now. We're on this edge constantly. The thing about being on that edge is that you can change something, anything. Sitting in your room, your room's just always a fucking mess. You have a bunch of shit all over the place. You got Cheeto wrappers, and you just can't wake up, and you can't find the time, or you can't find the fuck to give to clean up your room. See, that's the thing, is that you can change that like that. One day you'll wake up, and that's why I have so much faith, when I talk to people who are addicted to something. One day they're just going to wake up, and they're going to say, this isn't how I'm going to live anymore. And saying that word addiction, that is what is driving society nowadays. Young men today are getting dragged around like a little pig with a carrot in front of it, and our suicide rates show for it. You look at it, and we have higher suicide rates now than in the Great Depression. And to quote Brad Pitt, the Great Depression now is our lives. We buy cars we don't want, we work jobs we don't want, for things we don't want, and we go home to a wife we don't want, and all this bullshit. This isn't an audition, Nobody that's going to make fun of you is worth changing your life over. I remember there was this girl that I really liked, and one time I overheard somebody saying like, oh, hair on girls' arms is weird, And this is back in like middle school. And I saw that she had hair on her arms, and I was like, I don't want to be made fun of by anybody. And that's a normal thing to have hair on your arms. Not even armpit hair, but hair on your arms. And I stopped talking to her because I was so scared that somebody might say something about it. That's the type of self-conscious I used to be. Or maybe there was a job that I got that wasn't super honorable. It was like Domino's or something. And I was like, somebody could make fun of me on that if I was 1v1ing them in Fortnite and they were angry at me. So I can't be seen doing that. And my fear of, being myself and my want to become somebody else kept me from so much greatness. And that stems from judgment, because I would judge things being like, working at Domino's isn't a good job. Or maybe like this beautiful girl with hair on her arms isn't for me, that I'm joking, but like that's the type of self-conscious that I was. And now I'm looking at life now, and that judgment kept me from so much good. Constantly being like, I gotta throw my defenses, and I gotta punch and fight my way through this. If you fight everybody that gets close to you, nobody's gonna want to get close to you, Stop trying to be somebody else. I can't say it enough. I hate disgenuineness, and I think that the only thing that is good in this life is truth. And I'm finding that truth is in Jesus, but maybe you think truth's in something else. What I'm saying is uphold your truth. Be a true person. I hate this genuine lifestyle that everybody wants to live. Everybody wants to be the next Kim K or the next this or the next that. Nobody wants to sit here in their living room and say the absolute truth of their life. I'm sitting here, and that's why you guys should probably subscribe to this YouTube channel and maybe my Spotify. Listen, guys, I'm trying my best to be as honest as possible because, one of the first concerns with opening up a podcast is, Harlan, you don't want to say anything that could possibly, not get you a college offer or maybe get you your job. If I'm saying the truth and I don't get a job, it's because the truth isn't good enough for that job. If I say that I'm a Christian at my job and I get fired, that persecution is nothing compared to the persecution of being a liar or a cheater. That's a verse in the Bible too. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or as a thief or as a evildoer or as a busybody in other man's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. That's 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 15 through 16. I would rather die as a Christian than live as an evildoer or somebody in somebody else's skin, even if it's good skin or glorified skin, I'd rather, live in my body than Justin Bieber's body, which was a weird, thing to come to, because I always wanted to be somebody else. I always thought that, if I lived in one of my friends' houses, or if I grew up with their lifestyle, or, if things were just a little bit different on my half, I'd be fixed, And the weirdest thing is when I realized other people had problems too. And I was so ashamed of being, Harlan. I was so ashamed of this and that. And luckily I've been through the pain and I've been through the suffering that comes from going down that path. Hopefully it doesn't have to get that bad for any of you guys, but I'm saying right now in this moment, you can change your life around. You don't have to live constantly wanting these other things that the world tells you you want, or that this advertisement put out that AirPod Maxes look good on Brad Pitt. So then, you need to be the next Brad Pitt. Guys, be yourself. Like, I'm getting pissed right now. I'm just kidding. But I'm sorry, but that's what I needed to say. That I'm going to suffer as a Christian. That I'm not going to suffer as this picture of Harlan that somebody else told me I had to be. I need to suffer as Harlan and who Harlan was meant to be. And I'm sorry about that last episode. I filmed it in super high quality on my camera. I set up the, tripod. I got everything all dialed. I was like, this is going to be in 4K. And then my ISO to shutter speed ratio was messed up. So it looked like it was like slow motion almost. And that really discouraged me. And I'm bouncing back from that because it's like I put so much work into one episode and then I just had to put Minecraft, parkour over it. I don't want to have Minecraft parkour over it. I think that I'm interesting enough to not have Minecraft parkour over it. So we're going to be back with more videos. I just took a little bit of a break. That took forever to edit too. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. The editing went wrong. All of the audio was corrupted. All of the, video was corrupted. It was just terrible. So we're working on getting things back on track. We're in the new year. It was a terrible way to start out the new year, but we're bouncing back. We're living in the moment. God has blessed us. God has taken from us. Whatever it is, in whatever situation, praise be the Lord. Praise be Allah. Just kidding. That's a different God. Brush your teeth, comb your hair. Peace.